Hey, I want to thank everybody for once again tuning in to Beyond the Frequency. I appreciate your support. Continue to like and subscribe if you're watching my YouTube channel. And if you are listening on Spotify, those 5 stars would be amazing. Today on Beyond the Frequency, we're talking to Brandon Wright, the host of the ever so popular podcast known as Tinfoil Tales. It's going to be an amazing conversation. I think you're going to enjoy. I know I did. Let's get to it. Imagine a world where the lines between reality and mystery blur. My guest, Brandon Wright, explores this world on his award-winning podcast, Tinfoil Tales. From aliens to cryptids and everything strange in between, his show brings stories that make you question what lies beyond the frequency of every day. Today, two podcasters sit down for a casual conversation about the weird and the unexplained. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're listening on Spotify, please give me those 5 stars. With that being said, let's dive in. Hey, Brandon, how are you?
How you doing?
Good. Thanks.
It's early on a Saturday for me, but I'm up early all the time because my kids want to wake up at the crack of dawn, it seems like.
Yeah, no, obviously, man. No, I got kids too, man. So I hear you. Mine's a little bit older than yours. So fortunately for me, they sleep in now.
So I've got 13, 11, 5, and 3.
Wow,
So
that's a good spread.
It's a big spread, and it's always chaotic around here.
That's the beautiful thing, right? It keeps the house alive, the ambience, you hear noise, little pitter patter feet running around and everyone, mommy, daddy, and whatnot. So I guess I always tell folks, enjoy it while you can, because once they're gone, then it's just, just you and your thoughts.
Yep. That's I've been noticing time's been going a lot faster than I expected it to. My kids are getting so much older too quickly. Littlest one's going to preschool now. I was like, you were just a baby. So
Yeah. No, that's good, man. But yeah, I'm glad that you're enjoying it. I'm glad that you are seeing the value of it now. And I don't know what your work schedule is like, but I'm sure you're making the best time to spend with them and that quality time and be that father figure that, I'm sure you are striving to be. So good on you on that, Brandon.
I try. I said it's hard to manage my normal daily grind of a job and then try and do a podcast, but then my kids are all involved in extracurricular activities. So there's every night I've got stuff going on, so I don't even get a chance to even do my show until like after 9 o'clock.
Jeez. And then you're already mentally drained and everything though. So again, kudos to you.
So then I'm up at like 6 a.m. going to work.
Jeez. So, sounds like fun.
It's a daily grind.
I bet. Well, I mean, speaking about your schedule, let's talk about first. Okay, actually, let's first have you tell everybody that doesn't know you already who you are, what you do, and we'll go from there. Oh, and how to find you, of course.
Well, I am Brandon Wright. I am the host of Tinfoil Tales podcast, the American version, because apparently there is an Australian version too that has nothing to do with me. It's a couple of ladies from Australia talking about meth cookers out in the outback, I guess. So that happens. I get random emails from people asking me what I thought about this or that. I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm not from Australia. So for anyone listening, if you find someone that's talking about the politics and meth of Australia, that's not me. What my show talks about is I interview folks that have strange experiences. So a lot of cryptid stuff, a lot of alien abduction stuff, a lot of just conspiracy stuff. Obviously, with the name Tinfoil, you kind of have the rabbit holes we go down into. But for the most part, it is all just me talking with folks that have had some sort of strange experiences, and I'm not here to prove or disprove anybody. It's more or less just open conversation. I just turn it over for them to speak, and we should go from there. But for anyone that's interested, you can pretty much find it anywhere you listen to podcasts at. So Apple, Spotify, there is a YouTube. I don't do video, it's just audio, but there is video on YouTube. And the easiest way to get a hold of me or to find me, I just tell people to go to tinfoiltales.com.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Brandon. Man, that's the Australians over there with the Tinfoil Tales. I was trying to let you finish because I was involuntarily laughing here. But that's funny though. And how do you stay away from that? Like, do you today still get contacts, emails from people?
I just got one last week. Someone told me somebody had been arrested, and I was like, well, first of all, I said, hello, ladies, and then I went into this spiel about so-and-so being arrested. I replied back, I don't know who that is. I think you may have the wrong podcast. Also, for the record, I'm not a lady.
I mean, if they somewhere does like, is your name anywhere? Is the name Brandon anywhere? Like when they write you, or is it just Tinfoil Tales?
It just comes up Tinfoil Tales podcast, and they are Tinfoil Tales. But the difference is theirs has like the logo with a tinfoil hat on it, and I have like the artwork that's got like all the crazy stuff on it. So like that's what I tell people is like, look for the artwork that's got like kind of like what's behind me. It's not exactly this, but like something with like monsters and cryptids and stuff on it. Like that's how my stuff looks. It doesn't look like just a Tinfoil Tales bloody logo with a hat on it.
Yeah. Jeez, man. I'm sure that's always fun having handle that more often than you would like.
I don't know if there's anything I could do about it or not, because it's not like you can really own a name.
What can you do? Yeah. It's what it is. You know, it's one of those things that now comes with your podcast.
Yep.
You got the good stuff that you've gotten from it, and then now you have this stuff too. So
at one point I got a message I was ranked really high in Australia. And I was like, well, that's when I found out that podcast existed. Because I started getting a lot of people from Australia messaging me last spring. My show had been out for about 6 months, and it said I was in like the top 20 of podcasts in Australia. I was trending in Australia. I was like, what the hell's going on in Australia? And that's because people were finding they were looking for that one, and then they were finding mine. I was like, well,
so they were they giving you good ratings regardless? Like,
I don't know how it plays out. That's the thing I've noticed, like with my show. Very rarely do people write reviews or leave ratings or anything. For as much as what people interact with my show or whatever, they claim less than 1% actually ever do anything interacting with a podcast.
Interesting.
So I think I've still getting
the views.
Yeah.
Okay. You're getting the views, but you're not like, people aren't like actually making comments, or some people are not maybe describing or liking or anything like that. Is that what you're saying?
Yes and no. Like when it comes to like YouTube and stuff, I don't even pay attention to that because I don't really have anything to do with it. My podcast host releases the static image videos. But I've had my issues with YouTube because of some of the topics we talk about. I've been banned. And they don't really push my show. Like there's other podcasts that come out that talk about the same sort of things that get like a lot more views and a lot more stuff. But mine's buried. It's weird.
Selective, huh?
For a conspiracy person like myself, when you try and censor what I'm doing, that just furthers my conspiracy brain. Right.
Interesting. Well, okay, so let's get into okay. Before we talk about how you started Tinfoil Tales, like, let's tell the audience, who were you before you got into any of this stuff? Before you got into all the crazy, all the weird, all the stories, who were you?
I was just a guy that did metal bands. Like, I did vocals in metal bands and death metal stuff, and I tried to do it back in high school. We were awful, but I thought we were the shit because everyone thinks you're awesome in high school.
Right.
And going back now, you look at it, you're like, God, that was terrible. But I didn't have a whole lot of stock in stuff like this because for me, I didn't really believe in it. To me, like, I was a huge fan of the X-Files and monster movies and horror movies and all sorts of stuff like that, but I never took a whole lot of stock in any of it. Like, I thought Bigfoot could be real, but at the same time, I'm like, probably not. There's never been a body. And then I believe that there's aliens, but it's like, I don't believe they're coming down here and kidnapping people and probing them like they claim and all that other stuff. I was like, what would be the point of why they picked the most random person to do that to? Like, why wouldn't they come down and take someone prevalent, like the president or somebody? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I just was very skeptical on a lot of stuff. And today I still very much am skeptical, but I'm a lot more open-minded to things just because when you see stuff, you can't explain it. And then as much as you try and explain it, and it makes you start to question things, and then your whole reality starts to shift. And that's kind of where I'm at today is I started my show to find answers, and I've come away with more questions than I ever have of answers.
That's usually what happens when you have that one question that's like really burning a hole in your subconscious or whatever the case is. You then ask that one question and then leads to like two more questions or three more.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to answer those questions and then they open up more doors. I wonder why that process is the way it is. Like why is there no end? Why is it that you can't ask a question and then there's an answer and it explains everything, everything's clear, everything's good. I wonder why there's always more because infinite possibilities, I guess, infinite answers, infinite perspective.
I don't think we're supposed to know all the answers.
Great. Yeah. Well said. Well said. Yeah.
I feel like the more we dive into things, the more we turn up and the more questions arise because I don't think we're ever supposed to know all of the knowledge that's out there.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. You mentioned earlier that like why would aliens just come and abduct random people? Why not, like prevalent folks and everything? I don't know if I was reading or just whatever was in my memory at this point, but I had heard that people are like cattle. Like for example, why do we go and tag wildlife? We tag and we put little clippers on them, whatever, and we just track them and they go about their own thing. Then we observe them by doing these discovery channels and saying, look at this lion and its habitat and blah 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 and everything. So the same reason that we study these animals in the wildlife, why wouldn't another higher level species look at us as lower species and tag us? Many people have claimed that they've been tagged or probed or whatever the case is. They found chips or
Right.
some people, came out with bleeding noses and ears, whatever the case is. Like they're looking the same thing. So I guess that's why it's not. There's no cattle that's better than the other. So they're just like, let's just grab this one. He or she's interesting.
Right. Since I started doing the show, that's kind of what I go with it is basically I feel like when people are selected, there's a reason behind it. And I've started to realize that a lot of these similarities are something to do with their blood type.
Yes, I heard of that too, Brandon. Yeah, keep
And
going. Yeah.
the Rh negative, type O negative blood, or it's the universal blood for like universal donors. Those are the type of people that are typically the ones that you see that have been supposedly abducted. And then you mentioned cattle, you bring up cattle mutilations. I talked to someone recently, which I don't like to be the name dropper of people because a lot of other people are like, oh, I've talked to this person. But like anyone in this community would probably know who L.A. Marzulli is. He's been famous for a lot of the stuff that he's looked into, and I interviewed him, and he had a new documentary coming out where they talked about abductions, and he theorizes that they're taking like the stuff from cattle and they're using that to like incubate these hybrids, and that's why they're taking certain people or whatever. So I kind of started to think like maybe they need that universal donor blood because it's compatible with everything. So maybe that's how they're actually building these hybrids, if that's a real possibility. I don't know. I've never been abducted to say one way or the other if that's a possibility, but it's like, to me, it makes plausible sense, I guess.
The cattle, you're saying like they take these cattle and they use their womb? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they're basically using the wombs from the cattle. When you see cattle mutilations, sometimes there's pieces of them missing.
Yeah.
And they've been noticing like their stomachs and stuff are missing, and they think they're using those as ways to make like a womb for the hybrids to be born in.
I wonder what, like, I mean, I thought that the closest, let's just say, farm animal to humans was a pig. So why wouldn't you use a pig? Why would you use a cow?
I don't know. I think I've said the same thing too. I was like, why would they be taking cows though?
Yeah.
But because cows are bigger and these hybrids are supposed to be not like small, is what I've been told by some people. Like when they see hybrids, they're being grown to be larger than just infants. They're like,
I mean, they need more room,
right?
So I mean, shoot. Then if that's the case, go bigger. Why don't you get an elephant or something? You know, or like,
I don't know
they
if
just
it's
go
something to
wild.
do with like cattle being able to. I don't. The whole thing to me is weird. So, like I said,
Yeah.
it's scientifically, I don't know if it's possible, but I also don't know if it's scientifically possible for aliens to come down here and do things, because if you do all that aspect to it, like they're so far advanced that they're coming to our planet. Why are they doing the secret, shady stuff then? Like, what do they need us for if they're already so far advanced they can travel through space?
Right.
So,
Well, I think to kind of jump on that, I believe, well, from my research, we're interesting to them. We're interesting because we're the only beings that we live in the third density reality, right? And a lot of these beings are from different, what I believe, different frequencies, different planes of existence, different dimensions, and things like that. So one of the things that we have that other dimensions don't have is the ability to feel. We have the ability to feel. We have emotions. This is one of the strongest things I believe drives the universe. The universe is emotional. And I believe that these higher beings have they're just interested in experiencing what we experience,
I think
So,
that is the route that I go with too. Is I don't necessarily think they're coming from space, as more or less they're coming from different planes of existence. And
yeah,
what you just said made me think of something I haven't really considered. But what if the things that we see here, that is, when people say grays or whatever, and they always say they're like drones, what if they technically are, because they can't actually be in our third dimension? So they send something that can be. And that's what
exactly.
these things are. And they're using them to bring back the stuff to their reality. So that's why they have to have hybrids, because we can't get to theirs and they can't fully get to ours. So they're making mixtures that can get into both.
Yeah, I'm with that, Brandon. I'm totally with that. This to physically exist in this reality, you have to be dense. Okay. So like these other frequencies, imagine like if you look at just a frequency, it's as you barely can see it. In order for the frequency to shift down into the third density, they have to have a lots of layers for them to become solid. That alone is, if I was the frequency being from anywhere from outside of the 3D, that would be a challenge to me. Man, can I not only can I show up there, because again, it's like, why isn't everybody here, right? So for the ones that can make it here, technology, let's just call it to whatever technology that they may possess that will allow them to penetrate this dense reality and then exist. And then once they're here, they're like, wow, okay, what can I do? Like, oh man, I'm powerful, or let me get into this person's body, just like whatever, if they can, whatever the case is. They're gonna do things. They're gonna do things. They're experimenting. This, like I said earlier, this place is interesting. And this is why only a few are here, because I don't think this place is actually public. I don't think everything can get in, you know? And this is why I believe there's higher beings that there's all these people that I've talked to that channel beings, from the galactic federations and whatnot. There's these people that you may have heard that are guarding, that are protecting us. So like, why do we need protection? They know something that we don't. There's gatekeepers and things like that. There's lower level, entities that can come up to us. It's not easy to exist here. So the fact that we exist here, you and I are here, that's already a feat that even these higher beings are like, they're in awe, and to us, we're like, well, what are, like you said, like earlier, what makes some random person, anybody or anything that exists in this reality is interesting.
Yeah. Because if they're not from here, they don't have the same type of things. And I've talked with a lot of people that can, I don't know how this is possible, but they astral project. And they claim they can go into some of these different realities with their mind. So I've wondered if, say, these next dimensions above us, and I don't want to go on a whole spiritual route, but like, what if our souls, our spirit, our energy transverses to the next stage? Like, we're here on this third degree level, like the 3D world. What if we move on after this and they say there's an afterlife, and maybe the afterlife is we move on to the next realm? Some people want to say heaven or hell or other things like that, but what if it's not in that concept, but it's more like we move on to the next stage, which would be like the fourth dimension, which I think that's time, but the fifth dimension, the sixth. What if there's different levels that we go through? So when people
Right.
are tapping into astral projection, maybe when they're seeing these other things and these other creatures and beings or whatever they say they're seeing, they're actually transversing into those other realities that we are able to achieve once we are able to get away from where we're stuck at now. Maybe like when we die, we move on to that.
Yeah, exactly. And no, that's I think about that the same thing too. I think you are right, Brandon. We actually do, heaven is already this planet. I think we're already in that sense, but our perception, again, from the time that we're born, we're told this is the religion that you're born into. Here's the education that you should be believing. Here are the stories. Here are the prevalent people that you should be aware of. Like, we're told all of this stuff, so we create this illusion of what should be. But like you said, after we pass away, after we expire, and the only thing that really expires is our corporeal body. I mean, I tell folks this, a lot of people think that we are human beings trying to live, a spiritual life. No, no, no. We are spiritual beings first, living a human experience. Before we were, corporeal, we were energy. Conscious thought, our conscious. I was talking this to my family yesterday, to be a matter of fact, but I said, who? I asked my kids and my fiance, who are you? And like what identifies you, your personality? And after a couple of guesses and everything, I just mentioned, I said, it's our conscious thought. Your consciousness is your personality, and that's who you are. If my consciousness, Brandon, transferred over to you and yours to mine, I would ask you, who are you? Are you still
Right.
Brandon, or are you Cesar? Right? Right. That's all it is, right? So in a sense, by using that example, our bodies are just containers, vessels, avatars, whatever the case is. But our consciousness, once that leaves, there's no combustion in the engine. You know, if you compare it to the car is the body, the gas is like the blood, but that combustion is what gets the car moving. So when our conscious thought, which is I call the combustion or the energy, once if that's not here, we're not moving. We are vegetable, you know, paralyzed, whatever you want to call it, you know. So you've seen a lot of people that lose their minds and you're like, that's not so and so anymore. Like that's just not that person because their consciousness is no longer in that body. You know, something else is either there or they lost it or whatever the case is. So you're on the right track.
I wonder when people say they've been possessed and they claim it's these demons or whatever is actually possessing them. What if it is, you just mentioned consciousness change. What if it's someone else's consciousness has been transferred into someone else?
Yeah, yeah. And you're right, Brandon, that has happened accidentally too. There's been stories that I've also looked into where let's say a man goes into a coma. Well, his body's at the hospital laying in that bed, but his consciousness has went somewhere there, has left his body accidentally and it went somewhere else. Now, we don't understand what happens really when people go into a coma. It's all just predictions and theories and things like that. But they said this guy's consciousness left his body and he woke up and he was like, you know, in the year like 31,000 or something. And he was there. You've heard those before where they're there for like, you know, a month or even a year, you know, just trying to figure out how to get back. And this one story, this guy that went into the coma, when he woke up, the doctors in that high level society told him that they're familiar with this. This happens to them. This was common. It's he called it something like a conscious transfer or something. It's a big word that I'm not familiar with, but the point is that in the future, according to this story, they're aware like this happens. Conscious not thought energy just exchanges, it skips, you know, it moves and things like that. Yeah, I mean, what do we like, Brandon? How many times have you been like driving and your mind just goes off somewhere else?
So
Right?
I have a story that I can relate to with that one.
Tell me. Yeah, tell me.
And it happened a couple different times, but I used to work on third shift and I was driving a box truck and I'd have to go make my deliveries. There was times where I don't remember making the deliveries, but I did. So where did my time go? That ass, like to me, I don't remember the drive, and then I used to have to plow snow for the highway department, and there was times where I drove over 30-something miles, and I do not remember any of it. The next thing I remember, though, I'm hearing because now the truck blade is off on the edge of the road, and it like snaps me out of it. But like I remember turning around to make the route, and I was driving from one town all the way to the next town, and the town is almost 40 miles apart from the turnaround spot. So I drove almost 40 miles, and I don't remember any of it. I was like, was I sleep plowing? Because that's literally what it feels like.
Yeah. It's so I've heard of that situation with numerous people, and my understanding of it is that you don't control where and when your consciousness decides to go take a break. Okay. It's just like if you're driving your car doesn't control when you stop and go and get out and go do something, you know? So there's been people like how you just mentioned that are your consciousness puts your body in like autopilot and your body just continues doing what it's doing. Whether you're washing the dishes, you're working out, you're plowing, whatever the case is. Because remember, meditation is just you being present, you being there. So they kind of put a little pause. They put a little pause, and you kind of do your little, we'll be right back, and it pretty much your avatar is just doing whatever it's doing in that moment. So, and your conscious mind or your higher self isn't going to put you in danger. So it knows he's okay. He can make 40 miles. And your conscious thought, what happens is when they leave or when your higher self leaves, it's going to do something. it's preparing, like it could have prepared something for you that you're about to reach. So in that 40-mile route that you're taking, your consciousness left to take care of something, deal with other conscious beings, put them in your place. Maybe there's an accident, like, 40 miles ahead of you or something like that, and it's doing whatever it needs to do to remove it. Like your consciousness is doing, it's always working to protect you, its avatar, you know? So I think that when your mind, when you daydream, when you just kind of space out a little bit, in that moment when you kind of wake up, I always take a really strong moment. I close my eyes and I try to remember where I went. Where did I go? There's some fractal of residue of memory of my higher self should come back to you. And you're like, why am I thinking of China or something? I don't know, but just, it's interesting. It's very interesting. But the more that you pay attention to it, Brandon, you're going to surprise yourself of when you come back, you're not going to focus back on what you're doing. Be like, dang, why did I just get this thought in my mind? That wasn't you. That was your higher self.
Right. I've often questioned things about like consciousness or whatever. And I think you watched that episode, that live stream I just did last week with Rye. But we talked about like deja vu or whatever. I literally just had it again a couple days ago, and I messaged Rye afterwards. I was like, I just had deja vu again.
What was it?
I was driving down to this Bigfoot convention I was going to that weekend. And I don't remember exactly what it was. I'm trying to remember now. Something was said, or I did something or whatever, and I've seen it. Like, whatever, like, I was just driving, and something was going on. I was like, I was listening to something. I don't know. I felt it again. I was just like, I got that. You can almost like makes your hair stand up, feeling like I've already been through this. Yeah, it happened again, like literally the next day after I was talking about it the night before. But it's always strange when that happens. Like I said, it happens quite a bit. And I don't know.
What do you think deja vu is?
That's where I don't know. Is like, is it because I've already done this in another plane of existence?
Okay. All right. You're on the right track.
Do I have to make a different decision? Like, are we on repeat? We got to keep making the right decisions. So we got to keep going through life until we make the right choices. So that's why we have deja vu, because some reason, whatever, I don't even remember what triggered that one, but it did. I messaged Rye as I'm driving, which shouldn't do that, people. Just, if you're listening, don't text and drive. But I messaged him about, just had deja vu again, ironically. So it's like, I don't know why it happens. I don't know what the point of it is, because it's never anything of importance. It's always just something very minute, small, but it's enough that makes me notice it. And maybe that's part of it, is I'm trying to notice it. If that makes, like, I'm not openly out here like, oh, I need to notice this, but maybe part of me somewhere else is saying, I have to learn this. I have to understand this. Maybe because that's how I open myself up more to these other things by going through this. Maybe it is all conscious related.
Yeah. How often do you, when you deja vu, how often do you take a moment and just try to analyze it?
I did for about another 45 minutes as I was driving. I was like, what was the point of this? Like, what was...
Did you get anything out of it?
No. Not at all. I never do. Like some of the things, like I pull into a parking spot a couple weeks ago with my wife, and I just remember, like, I'd seen, she said something about I have to get something. I was just like, something about that event. Like, I've already seen pulling into the spot. I already remember her saying something. What was the point of any of that? I don't know, but it was enough to make me be like, I've already been here before. And I've had other issues where, I say issues, but I've had other instances where I've been just doing something. I was like, man, I already know this was going to happen because I've already seen it. Like about 2 months ago, I was out just digging a hole for something. And I remember doing that. I don't know why. I hadn't dug that spot before. Like, we were digging out a sidewalk, and I just had this memory. I've already done this before. So it's just strange little stuff.
Yeah. No, that is interesting. So you're familiar with the concept of parallel realities.
Right.
Okay. They're right next to you, right? So like the difference between like the next parallel reality next to us could be you're the host of Beyond the Frequency and I'm the host of Tinfoil Tales. That's it. Right. Okay. So also that's a possibility. Now also in this infinite parallel situation, there's also time. So the difference between the parallel universe next to us could just be that it's, a few seconds, a few minutes, like ahead of us or behind us, right? So there's times that when you get deja vu, this is the way that I perceive it, is that if they're right next to each other like this, there's times that they're gonna touch for a second. And when it touches, you absorb the memory of yourself in that parallel universe. And so that Brandon could have dug that hole, whether it be a day prior to, a week, a few seconds ago, and then you happen to see it. So what's happening, Brandon, is what I think is the more that you keep receiving these deja vu occurrences, you are tuning in, you are fine tuning, you're taking that dial and you're tuning in until you finally, well, who knows, 20, 40 years from now, you might even be clairvoyant, but
Right.
you're fine tuning your senses. And that's a great thing, because anything that elevates you to your highest frequency, to connect closer to your higher self, because that's the goal. That's the goal, to keep going up, okay, in these dimensionals. So now some people, they don't learn whatever that they came here to do in this third density, because of all the denseness inside this reality, they forget, right? They, as an energy being, they come in to this density, they forget with all the noise, and then they're like, what's my purpose? What am I here for? And then they start living and experiencing this existence, and then they'll get signs like deja vu. They'll get people that come into their lives and inspire them to try to help make them remember that question that we always ask: what's my purpose? Why am I here?
Yeah.
That's that question. Why is it? I want to ask you this, Brandon. Why is it that for centuries, people, humans are always asking that question: what is my purpose?
It's like the most common question that gets asked, because everyone wants to know what their purpose in life is. I ask myself that all the time. It's just something that we go through, and I don't know if it's because universally we're trying to achieve more than what we think we're worth. Like, even for me doing the show, like, I feel like what I'm doing now is putting me on a path that I feel like I'm trying to do something a little bit different than what I normally would have done. So am I trying to reach into like that extra, I don't know what like the proper termings would be, but basically am I trying to achieve that extraness that I need to try and get to the next stage? Like, do I fulfill my purpose? Like, am I doing something that makes me feel like I'm achieving what I'm set out to actually do?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I heard this in one of your podcasts where you use the term leveling up. I don't know if it was you or somebody else, but like in a video game, right? We're always, I mean, and let's talk about that. So like from the macro to the micro, right? Everything is rinse and repeat, right?
Right.
If you look all the way down to the atom, and even below that, it's always doing the same thing. It's revolving around something. It's got spiral effects. So video games, our goal is to not only get to the end, but we're also trying to level up. Where we're trying to increase our power in that game. So let's compare that to the macro. Let's say we're the micro, our existence, and the macro is the higher self. So let's say that our higher self, your higher self, Brandon, is the person playing, or the entity playing you in this reality. You're the character, and why wouldn't your higher self try to level you up? Right? That's what they're doing, right? So they're putting this podcast show, in front of you. They're putting these people that come and share their stories. There may be, a sentence or a word that within these stories that you're hearing that is your trigger to be like, that thought just came in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm leveling up. You're getting your consciousness is absorbing all this new information, this new intelligence, and yeah, and it looks out for you. I think we're definitely playing this game, the Matrix, if you will. Have you heard of that game, No Man's Sky?
Yeah, I have it.
You have it. Okay, so you're familiar with this game. I don't know how much regarding the background regarding how that game was built
Mm-hmm.
that you are aware of. Are you familiar with kind of like how that game was built and some of the
A little
discussions
bit.
around it? A little bit about it.
I don't know all the discussions. I just know that they claim that it's quote unquote endless, but it's really not. Like, apparently you can eventually get to somewhere, but it's almost impossible to, because it's constantly regenerating and generating new. For every person that plays it, it's expanding the universe.
It is.
And so it's, to me, that was actually kind of a cool idea. That's why I got it. But I played it for a lot. Like, I got it last year and I played it for a lot of hours. And I was like, this is starting to get boring because it's literally all the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's so you're right. But it is endless. It is endless because so this game has over like 80, was it 80 quadrillion
Mm-hmm.
planets. Okay.
Right.
And then that's not including species and things like that. So I don't know if you are aware of what Indinkra codes are.
I've heard of the term, I think, but I don't know what it means.
Okay, well, the Indinkra symbol comes from the Dogon tribe, and they basically wear all this art around them. Okay, and they call them Indinkras. Now, this professor named James Gates Jr. He's a theorist, quantum physics and things like that. He's a professor in Maryland. He actually studies the formula or the code that all quantum physicists study that talks about the ether, like the world, like what creates everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as he dove into this code, like he found a few layers of this code, but at this very last layer that he got to, he found out that it was binary. But these binary codes were actually shaped like these Indinkra codes, like the Dogon tribes. They're just kind of like symbols, kind of like a font, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's why he called them Indinkra codes. But anyways, these same codes, he found out that these are the same codes that run our web browsers and our internet searches. So he was like, in the foundation of this formula of everything, there's digital code. And he asked himself and his peers, how is this possible? How is there digital code in the foundation of what tells us that reality, what reality is? So he says publicly, this proves to me that we are in the matrix. Now
Mm-hmm.
this same code was taken into that game, No Man's Sky. This little piece of code of it, not the whole thing, just a piece of it. And they put it in these college, I think 3 or 4 college students that created this game, took that same code, put it in there and let it go. And this is what created No Man's Sky. So this code is now regenerating, recreating new worlds, new species, frame by frame as needed. So when you log in and you're playing, whatever's on your screen, that's what exists now. But then when you move it to the right, it creates whatever it needs to create.
Right.
And that concept is how a lot of people, when it comes to the simulation theory, think about our reality. Right now, this room that you're in is all that exists. And everything outside that room, your family, your house, the trees, the cars, are potential waves of light ready to be rendered and collapse when you observe it. But because you're not observing it, it doesn't exist per se.
Right.
What are your thoughts about that?
You explain it a lot better than I ever have, but that's kind of how I've said to people, like when you just mentioned what I meant about being in a game. It's that sort of concept is And I've made a joke. I was like, the sad part is no one wants to accept that we're all just NPCs. And
Yeah.
we're all going about our business and we're just the random NPCs of this universe. But for me, it's like we're all here. And again, we're all on this 3D level, this 3D world. And the other levels, the other stages we have to get to. I always use the Mario reference because it's always the first video game I ever played.
Yeah.
Like, I said we have to get to that part where we have to jump and grab the flagpole and slide down, and we can go on to the next stage. That is where we're at, I feel like, for us. And what you basically just said is it's a code. I do believe to an extent, like if you think about it in a rational standpoint, I say rational, but most people are, this guy's a whack job. It is very simulated seeming. Like everything seems to be, if you break it down, like you mentioned, like with the atoms, even smaller, everything, it's almost like binary code, numbers, and it's very, very sequenced in the sense of it's programmed. And not to get, again, philosophical or religious or anything like that, but they always say there's a creator. Maybe the ultimate creator was the designer of the program. And we're just living in it.
Yeah. And that's the question, right? So that's a great segue, Brandon, into, I'm going to ask you a straight up question. Take a moment if you need to think about the answer. But in Brandon Wright's logic and understanding, what is God?
I don't think God is the God that has been forced upon a lot of us. And I don't say that in negative towards anyone or their religion, but I don't think gods and religion are the same as what actually God would be. Maybe God is, again, what I just meant, the programmer. You mentioned this code. Did God design the code that was found? Is God the code? He gives life and expands everything else. Maybe they search for this supposed God particle. Like, I don't think God is a person or a spirit or anything like that. I think God is just creation in general. I don't know how else to describe it other than I think like God is the creator. And everything that we see has been created by a higher creator, like a higher being or whatever it could possibly be. It would be God. Now then you get, well, what created God? I don't know.
Yeah. Where do you go from there, right?
Right. So that's why I don't tell people like I'm against religion or anything like that. I know there's a lot of religious people that are involved in stuff like this, and that is perfectly fine. I grew up in a Pentecostal house. But for me, it's just like, if that works for people, that's great. But for me, I feel like there's more to it than just that.
No, I like that. Yeah.
To give it a straight up answer, I just say God is the ultimate creator. What God is, no idea.
Yeah. Was he native? I don't know, but he's definitely not, from what you're saying, he's definitely not what the rest of us humans say he is, right? I mean, like no one knows, right? I mean, we got cultures that believe in a dozen gods. We got cultures that believe in monotheism, right? So it's like, what's the truth, right? There's now, as one of the great thing about us doing these podcasts and talking to different people and collecting their stories is if you're going to look at the whole, you got to be able to understand, you got to be able to look at the pieces. And the best pieces brought to you are the stories, the experiences, the perspectives of different people. So the 8.5 billion people, which you'll probably never have on your podcast, but if you know what, no, actually I'm wrong on that statement. In some parallel reality, you have found some way to talk to 8.5 billion people. But anyways, the point is that the more pieces that you collect, the better and the clearer that whole picture appears to you, right? You know, because everybody has a different story, a different piece of the puzzle. you and I mean, we've seen, you and I can be looking at this. We're in the same situation, looking at the same thing, but then when we tell our stories, they're not going to be the same, right? The question is, why is that? Why is that? What do you think?
There was a study done, and I forget for what it was, but they let people watch something. And I've had this study done for a job, which is weird that the job was doing this, but
Interesting.
they basically brought in a tape recorder and they hit play, and it played for about 5 minutes, and then they gave us paper, and we had to answer questions about what we just heard. And I don't even remember at this point, it's been almost 20 years ago. This was in 2006 when this happened, but they gave me this test, and it was a hiring agency. They contacted me. I had the highest score out of everyone that applied for this job. They didn't offer me the job. They said I
Okay.
was too qualified. It was to drive a forklift at this factory. They said I was too qualified to drive a forklift because I'd done so well on the listening aspect and answering the questions. And then they gave like multiple choice stuff, like just to see where people were at, and like math stuff. They said I was too qualified to. I was like, I didn't want to, at the time, like it was $16 an hour. I was like, that's a really good job to drive a forklift. I'm driving a forklift right now for 10.
Yeah.
So I didn't get the job because they said I was overqualified. But there's been studies done where they do stuff like this, to where they release information, they make people watch videos, and then they ask them what happened. And 9 times out of 10, everyone has something different to say happened. Their versions are different than what they saw. Why is that?
Why is that, right? Why is that? So everybody collects information differently.
Mhm.
And based off of that, based off of what they collect, they project through auditory, through visual, and they project, this is what I saw. This is what interprets. So let me go back a little bit to when I asked you about what is God. So again, to be clear, I don't know if I ever mentioned this in my previous podcast with anybody, but I do have a foundation also. You know, I did first communion, a Catholic church, all that good stuff, Bible study, all that great stuff, right? But from every foundation, you then basically, you got to either continue it or you break off from it, but you still have that foundation. So I like Brandon said earlier, I don't believe in that you know, God is the one that everyone, you know, depicts as this is God and everything. This is the way he looks like. This is his hair color. This is what he smelled like. You know, this is what he said. But I do believe that there's a source, right? That there's a higher source. There's a creator of all things. So I do believe in something greater than us. Now, let's look at it this way. I mentioned earlier about the micro and the macro, right? So
Mhm.
starting with the micro, our brains are in our skull, and they're in complete darkness. Can you agree with that? Complete darkness, right? They don't know what's going on outside of this body, but they have friends. They have their receptors. They have touch. They have sight, hear, taste, smell. So your brain says, "Hey, friends, go out there and collect the information. Like, tell me what's going on out there." So I touch things, I smell things, I hear things. And through these receptors, these electrical impulses, they go back to the brain, and the brain says, "Hey guys, thanks a lot. I'm going to figure it out." So your brain figures it all out and everything. And then it projects out your visual and says, "Okay, here's what's out there." Okay. Now, if our brain has to use its receptors to decipher what's going on out here so we can navigate through this existence, let's go to the macro. The macro is, let's say, source, right? God or whatever the case is. That entity needs to do the same thing. So now what it does, it's then creates, it imbues its God energy into everything that exists: a blade of grass, a pebble, a human, an animal, an insect, the atom itself. And what it does is it's now collecting information, come back to it. It then subjectively, it's learning, it's experiencing itself subjectively through our experience. So source itself, through my perspective, it says, I want to experience life through Brandon. I want to experience life through Cesar. And I want to experience life through this blade of grass, this little leaf flowing in the wind. It's collecting. It's on a data collecting mission to ask the same thing that we in the micro ask is, who are we?
Mm-hmm.
What's our purpose? This entity that you said that we don't know how it created, it's trying to ask and answer that same question. So would it be illogical in some sense to say, aren't we asking the same questions, plural, that the macro, the source, is asking itself?
Right.
What are your thoughts about that?
It made me think of something. Again, I'm not saying deja vu, but I just thought of this. When you mentioned that, and this could be construed incorrectly or wrong or whatever, but what if what we perceive as the macro of the creator, the God, what if we're all that? What if everything about that we see in life, what if everything that we, like this nail that I keep fidgeting with in my hand, our conversation, this microphone, like everything that exists, what if it's all just another form of the creator? Like we're all one solid piece of the puzzle we're trying to figure out. We are the puzzle.
Yes. Yes. And like I said, to your point, and like what I said earlier, it is experiencing itself subjectively through everything else that exists.
Mhm.
So that goes into the mindset, the thought about dying. I mean, what actually dies? The body. That's it. The body. It's temporal. So once the body expires, right, it collected whatever it needed to collect in its lifetime. So when you expire, Brandon, you've collected through your experiences, you've learned things like having your podcast and things like that. You're learning things, okay, through your experience. Same thing with me. When you and I expire, we take that information back to where? Source. And then it decides whether we rinse and repeat. It's always collecting. Everything that exists is always collecting information, you know, to survive and, you know, to thrive, to get better. So it's just a lot of people. And you mentioned about what if everything is just kind of like one, right? What if it's all the same thing? Yeah. We're all like, I tell folks this, and I'm selected folks. I guess I'll probably say it's now on the podcast, but I tell folks that I say, look, guys, take it how you want it, but I am a God. I didn't say I am God. I said I am a God. Why? Because we all have, even in our pinky, we all have that small spark, the essence, if you will, of source. Our consciousness, where does that come from? It doesn't come from just my body. It comes from somewhere else. So whatever that is, that's who we are. We're a piece of that.
Not to derail, but I was thinking, what about people that don't have a conscience? Like the inner monologue.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Elaborate.
There are people that don't hear themselves think. They don't have like an inner monologue. Like they don't have a consciousness, so to speak. Like they don't. I didn't know this was a thing until recently, but apparently people have no inner monologues. Like they read things and I don't know how to me, that makes no sense of how they don't understand. They don't hear themselves. They don't hear something. Like it's just complete silence.
Did you hear this? Was this through one of your stories or one of your like interviews?
I've seen it before, but I've talked about it on an interview with, it's been mentioned a couple times in some of these recent episodes, probably within the last couple of months. But I think it was back in like May, someone had talked about people not having inner monologues. And I was like, yeah, I actually just saw a study done about people that don't have inner monologues. And sometimes this relates to people that are considered quote unquote psychopaths because they don't have that like consciousness about them. So they don't have that feelings or care. Like they're just completely dead inside. That's where the term I think originates, because there's nothing in there. They're just completely just cut off from everything. How does that work when people don't have that? If we're all part of this thing, and then you have these people that don't have a, I don't want to call them soulless, but that's what it seems like they are. What are
Yeah.
they?
I think it goes to the term that you use, NPCs.
Mm-hmm.
So in a video game, Brandon, what's an NPC? It's
A
what?
non-playable character.
Right. And it's program code to just do to just exist, to just
Right.
do whatever
Just be
it's
there.
programmed to do. That's, to me, that's the answer to your question. Some of those people are actually, good and bad. Good and bad. There's a lot of NPCs out there. Oh, you know what? Actually, Brandon, let's try this out. So there's a test that I caught a couple of years back about that. I guess it'll prove whether you're an NPC or not. So it's really quick. So we'll give it a shot. Okay, so what I want you to do, and this is just 3 questions, Brandon. So I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to imagine an apple, a red apple. Can you imagine that?
Yep.
Okay. Next, now I want you to change the color of that red apple to green. Can you do that?
Yep.
Okay. Now the last thing I want to ask you is pick up that apple, look at it, kind of turn it around, look at underneath it, above it, and then take a bite of it. Can you do that?
I can do it. I don't want to because I don't like apples.
That's
But
fair, but you were able to do it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And that's it. So here's how this test works. Apparently, the first 2 questions anybody can pretty much do, even an NPC. But the third question, when I asked you to pick it up, move it around, take a bite of it, that NPCs can't do that because that takes imagination and creation. See, switching the color is a simple, like like kind of like dualistic, just this or that, black or white, up or down, left or right. But doing all of this stuff and imagining it, you moving it around, that. So I've actually asked people this in selective, groups, obviously, right? But I've asked people to do this, and I've come across 2 people, Brandon, 2 people that can't do that third part. And I mean, but I went through a lot of people to get to these 2 people, and everybody's like, yeah, I'm like, man, this test is bullshit, right? But then I found these 2 people, and I had to ask, like, really? Like, are you messing with me? Like, and they're like, no, like, I don't, like, they're like, they don't even know. They're like, I don't know. I can't see myself moving it around. I said, but you were able to change the color. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, interesting. And I left it at that. I said, okay, that's cool. But I mean, if everybody was doing it, I'm like, all right, fine. This thing's what, but those people got stuck. And then that totally brought back confidence into this test. I forgot where I got it from, but I had it years ago. So I don't know. I test you and the listeners and anybody, just as a funny little thing, just kind of do it. See what you get.
Don't freak out if you can't do it. I'm gonna go try it on my family here when I get done.
Do it. Yeah. Test it out and see. And I mean, just have them do anything that involves, like, have them toss the apple up and, whatever. Just have them do something outside of those 2 questions. Have them do something else with their imagination. And, but yeah, I check my family too, though. Everybody's good. No NPCs here.
But I don't think my 3-year-old will understand what I'm saying, but
no, yeah, you gotta wait a little while. I think that's comprehension and whatnot. So one thing that I didn't ask you in the beginning, Brandon, is Tinfoil Tales. How did you come up with the name?
that's a good question. And the answer is pretty boring. Basically, back in 2020, when everything was kind of on a lockdown, there wasn't a whole lot we could do. I used to do band stuff. The reason I have all the recording stuff is I did death metal vocals for a band, which we didn't do anything after that because we couldn't. Like, we played a show in Indianapolis, and then the very next day is when lockdown happened. So we were just kind of not doing much. And I was talking to a friend about a lot of the weird things going on in the world at the time. And he was sending me these videos for certain type of conspiracy stuff. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because it'll get you flagged. But there's a lot. there's a lot of things that we talked about, and I said, you know what? And at the time, I didn't know anything about podcasts. I didn't listen to podcasts. I had no interest in podcasts. I was thinking, I was like, this would be a great topic or a great thing to do. Like, expose some of the stuff. Let's talk about some of these conspiracies. Let's do this type of stuff. I was like, well, a conspiracy person, they always call them a tinfoil hat wearer. And we're going to talk about stories of these conspiracies or whatever. So I said Tinfoil Tales. And I sat on it for 2 years. I didn't do anything with it. But then I started listening to podcasts, and some of the conspiracy ones I found were completely, I didn't like, they were dumb. I'm not going to like beat around the bush. Some of them were very stupid conspiracy podcasts.
Yeah.
And I ended up coming across a couple other podcasts, and they were interviewing people about something that they'd seen and experienced. And I was like, I didn't know these types of shows existed. And they were talking about something that I related to personally. And it kind of just like hooked with me. And then lo and behold, 2 years later, I decided, screw it, I'm just going to start this show. And I end up changing the concept to talk about people's experiences, because paranormal, cryptids, UFOs, abductions, all that stuff, to me, it all fits under that whole. Most of the time, the average person is going to call that person a crazy person. So even a tinfoil hat wearer, they call them a crazy person. It's almost like an insult to them. But I don't see it as insulting, like it's embracing it. Like you're owning that word now. Like these are the stories that people normally can't talk to about someone because you're going to be labeled as crazy. But here on my show, you're not crazy. You're just explaining your crazy stories to the world.
Yeah.
And I don't mean it as they're crazy, but to the average person, like they're crazy people.
Yeah. And
So,
who's average these days anyways, right?
right.
What's, like I've always told folks when they mention the word normal, it's like normal to who? Who's the foundation of normal right now? Right?
Right.
There so when people say like, oh, well, that person's not normal or they're not like everybody else, well, everybody else is individual, and and everyone has their own thoughts or their own perception of what normality is, so let's just drop that.
Mm-hmm.
But I appreciate you explaining tinfoil tales. It makes perfect sense. I figured before I even asked you, I figured that might have been the reason why and everything, but it's totally appropriate. So
It's just a collection of all the topics that gets discussed on the show. Like there's conspiracy stuff and all sorts. Like it was rooted from conspiracies, and I'm not a conspiracy tinfoil hat wearing person myself. Like I think a lot of these conspiracies are stupid. Like I think there's some that are probably rooted in truth, but there's some that are completely outlandishly out there, and I think they're just implemented to discredit the real stuff. Like
yeah, clutter, just clutter a bunch of, just start throwing a bunch of like random stuff, and then people are going to get lost in it, and that creates what? Chaos, confusion, right? Fear. When people don't understand something, it's fear kicks in, right? So regarding fear, I want to ask you, Brandon. So are you familiar recently, the last couple of years, how Congress and the government has now been freely releasing all this, redacted, unclassified information now, and all of these stories and everything? Like, isn't it weird how just even, I don't know, 40, 50 years ago, it was like, don't you dare talk about this stuff. Don't. I mean, you need to be like deep in the woods with the cloak, talking to people and whispering. And now it's like these 1-star generals or colonels, active duty, people sitting in these positions are now like saying, yeah, there's aliens. Like it's nothing. Yeah, there's aliens. We've known about it and blah 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 and everything. So I want to ask you, Brandon, why now? Why do you think they're talking about it now?
it might be an unpopular opinion, but what if what they're saying now is still another means of throwing people off? Like the information they're releasing and I'm not saying there's not aliens, but what if that's the narrative they're trying to get people to go to, because they're still trying to cover up what could really be? What if the aliens that they were saying are from space really aren't from space? And one of the ladies in Congress mentioned this specifically back in January, which I thought was very weird for her to bring up. She said interdimensional.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is a very different term for them to use to describe these sorts of UAPs or beings or anything. So again, they're releasing this information in slow bits, maybe because they know there's stuff coming and they're still trying to be ahead of it. But I don't think they want to admit to stuff because they don't have a way of controlling it.
Absolutely.
If the government cannot control something, they don't want to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
They don't want to give it power. They don't want to say that we're not the highest tech out there. We're not the top of the food chain. We're not nothing. Like, if they don't understand it, they can't control it. They don't want to even talk about it. They don't want to acknowledge it. So I think the little droplets that come out now, I think, are more or less just to kind of put the seeds out there, but they're still not really going along with it as full-on disclosure. Like, it's still slowly trickling down to condition people into the fact that, you know what, we don't control these things, so that if the chance comes out that one of these things just pops up out of nowhere in the middle of New York City, like on Independence Day, we're like, hey, we tried to tell you guys, we gave you nuggets. It's them of just releasing stuff slowly to the trickle so they can still have the ability to control their narrative if they were trying to do the right thing.
Yes, absolutely. I was just trying to look up here because, okay, so here's, and I'm with you, Brandon. I've been telling folks this for, I'd say, about a year now, recently, that because of all this releasing, they're trying to control the narrative. They're trying to get ahead of it, right? So like you just mentioned, yeah, they're like, if something happens, whatever that may be, we told you, right? So I think my assumption, conspiracy theory, whatever you want to call it, is that they are prepping us for what's coming, or what they're going to do. So all of this fear that revolves around, oh, there's UFOs out there, there's aliens, they're dangerous. You guys remember that movie, right? Yeah, that's what they're going to do to you. They're going to eat your babies and whatnot. But I mean, if aliens were going to, attack us or destroy us, they would have done this a long time ago, right? So I mean, it's like, why wait for a particular time frame? I believe that the government, since Roswell and even prior to that, has reverse engineered spacecrafts technology that they've already found, and they've been using it. They've been testing it out. So when people are looking up in the sky and they're like, oh, it's a UFO, it might just be a government aircraft that we're just not aware of. I mean, let's be logical about this in the sense that, is the military going to tell us every aircraft that they create? No, they're not going to put it out there, because if they do, then the other countries will know what we have and things like that. So, and they have to test these things, right? So where they're going to test it? Not underground. It's got to come back up. So, just the other day, Tampa, Florida, which is where I'm located at, downtown, there was a triangular shaped UFO, and it became a thing. And I know Florida has a bunch of stuff, down here, from UFOs to alligators, but
Lizard people,
yeah, all that good stuff, and Floridians, just period. But they, I ended up finding that there is an actually U.S. government patent that talks about the schematics and the building of a triangular shaped UFO. Have you ever seen that or heard that?
Yeah.
And I was like, when I saw that, I was like, what? The government actually stamped this and said, yeah, because I don't know too much about patents. I don't know about you, but it's, in order for them to stamp it and say it's good to go, that means that we had the materials to build this. It, based off of the way that they explain how it functions or is supposed to work, it'll do it. And whoever wants to build it, whoever the person is that submitted the patent, they're kind of saying, okay, go ahead, it's yours, have at it and stuff. So I mean, when you saw that triangular shaped pattern, if that's what you saw and everything, what did you think about it when you first saw it?
There are a lot of patents that, if you want to go down that rabbit hole,
Yeah.
that especially now considering what just happened last week, I've been seeing lots of patents about weather control, which ironically was the first episode I ever done of my show. But yeah, the timing of all that is strange. But if you want to go down a rabbit hole, start looking up the U.S. patents, because there is a lot of weird stuff. As far as the triangle goes, I've often wondered and said this is most likely our technology. And I've even said before, like when you see 99%, I think, of UFOs are basically man-made. I'm not going to say that they're all man-made, but majority of them are. And the ones that don't make a whole lot of sense, maybe that's because they're so far advanced, they don't make sense to us right now because we don't understand the technologies that they're working on.
Yeah. And I mean, because then you ask yourself, the fighter pilots that go up there and they're like, oh, like, and they're over here trying to figure out and explain stuff too. One or two things is happening. Either they are aware, they know exactly what it is because they happen to be there at the right time, or they just don't know because, again, just because they're fighter pilots doesn't mean they're privy to all the information. So even they are like, and like it's like your family throwing you a surprise party, and you're not aware of what they're doing, what they're planning, right? So the government can also surprise their own people and build and create things. There's all these private organizations. I mean, look at NASA used to be, something that was, held by the government. And then once everybody started asking them questions in the 60s, like, hey, so what are you guys collecting? What are you guys finding and discovery? And they were like, oh, that's going to be a problem. And then don't forget the FOIA and the Freedom of Information Act. People started using that and started saying tax dollars, give us the information. So what do? They shut it down. They shut it down. And then wait a minute, NASA came back. Oh, but they're not part of the government. Oh, they're privatized. Interesting. Why is
Now
it
they don't have to
privatized?
release any information.
Exactly. And then the UFO stuff, you're like, okay, if UFOs aren't a real thing, which obviously now they say that they are, but if UFOs aren't a real thing, why is it so important to change the term to UAPs? I get it. Probably because we asked you to release everything that says UFO. So you're like, here's everything that's UFO. And then we're like, well, what about the stuff that's behind the desk? Oh, no. That's not
That's not
UFO.
UFO.
That's UAP. So it's like you guys always,
It's one
finding a
step ahead.
way, one step ahead. So regarding this whole UFO thing with the government creating, like you said, man-made crafts, I think what they're doing is preparing for the next phase. In this case, okay, what's profitable? War. War is profitable. Okay, countries get a lot of money. I don't know if this is true or not, so don't start commenting and blowing up my emails when I make this comment. It's just we're just conversating here. But I'm thinking that, like, let's say talking about the US government, what if there's nowhere else for us to like make money? There's no wars for us to really fight, right? We're now being the peacekeepers and everything, right? So if there's no other place to conquer, where else do we go? We go up. We go into space, right? So we go into space and everything, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we have a space force. And you're like, okay, that's cool. You guys going to go explore? No, we're a defense force. A defense force defending from what? Well, you mean asteroids? Yeah, we're going to be. So anyway, so they create this defense force. You're like, okay, I'm with it. Okay, I like Star Trek. I like Star Wars. That sounds kind of cool. I still don't understand the defense part, but okay, I'll play with it. And then all of a sudden, they release all this information. There's UFOs, there's aliens, blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden, they start showing up and everything. So I think what's going to happen here in a few years, probably very soon, is that they're going to take one of these UFOs. They're going to go out to the ocean, wherever one of our Navy carriers or something like that, and they're going to destroy it. Just calling it something. They could destroy a tree. I don't care. But I'm just saying they're going to destroy something. And they're going to say, People, we just got attacked by aliens. Everybody starts to freak out. Now you have chaos and fear. So what does everybody do? Everybody starts going to the government. Government, what are you gonna do? We're being attacked. Hey guys, don't worry.
We'll
We're
take care of
prepared
it.
for this. We have the Space Force, but here's what we also need. We need you guys to give us trillions of dollars so we can create equipment and spaceships and things to defend ourselves. Wait a minute. You know how to create a spaceship? Yeah. Just don't worry about it. Just give us the money and blah, blah, blah. So everybody starts, again, giving away because big, chaotic situation. And then all of a sudden, to call it 5 years happen and no ships, no equipment. And people are like, what happened to the money that we're giving them? We had prototypes. They didn't work, but we're almost there. We need more money from you guys. And they start collecting more money from us and everything. Never got attacked. We got attacked one time, but all they needed was that one time to cause this chaos and everything. So my point is that I think we humans are setting us up because we're always trying to make money. There's always greed out there. We're trying to conquer something, and I think this is what's also preventing the true non-human species to really have a sit down with us because we're freaking childish. We got all the nuclear missiles around the planet. Where are they pointed at right now, Brandon?
Each other.
Back on us. That's how stupid we are and everything. We got these, one nuke is enough. All the nukes in the world pointing right back at each other. For what purpose? And this is why you see stories about aliens going by these silos and deactivating them because they're like, no. I think, like I mentioned earlier in this conversation, we're like cattle, so they're not going to let us destroy, ourselves, Anyways, all right, Brandon. So I know we've gone long enough here, so we're going to wrap things up. It was a great conversation. What do you think?
I definitely enjoyed it. I was going to ask, I'll have you on my show sometime if you're interested. Because
Brandon, I would love it.
The stuff that we just talked about, I want to do an episode about. So I've been looking for someone, and you seem to be very knowledgeable about stuff, especially what we just talked about. So I definitely want to have you on my show sometime.
Cool, Brandon. I appreciate it. I will be honored, very humbled. Yeah, dude, we're just, again, two guys just sitting down, just having a conversation. This is what I also like about my podcast, too, is that the idea is for whether you have experiences, stories. I'm really interested in abilities, right? If you have abilities, come on the show, sit down at the digital table, and let's like bring your potluck. I'll bring mine. Let's break bread together. Let's have that conversation. And then for those of you that enjoy this conversation, great. You're welcome. For those of you that don't like it, it's not for you. I'm so surprised that you're still listening, but you're here. So obviously we caught some bit of your curiosity. But either way, guys, like just keep asking these questions, okay? This is what makes good. Just asking these questions and then finding out more answers and then going down the rabbit hole and never getting the right answer, but it still drives you to do something. So
yeah.
So Brandon, what I like to do with all my guests is at the end, I like to ask 3 questions and I want to hear your answers to them. So
Go for it.
Me. All right, my first question to you, Brandon, is if you could send a message to humanity that everyone could hear, what would it be?
Cliche as it sounds, stop hating each other. Like, that is the worst thing about our humanity is we literally are always forced to hate one another. We have to disagree. We just mentioned all the weapons pointing at each other. I think it's by design that we've been programmed to do that because that is how we stay stuck here. Until we can learn to love one another and get along, we're never going to achieve that higher consciousness because we're always too busy fighting with one another.
Love that. I love that. What is one mystery of the universe that you wish you could solve?
To be honest, we didn't even get to talk about it, which maybe do a follow-up sometime. The reason I do my show is because in 2007 I saw something in the middle of the road that I cannot explain. It defies all sorts of logic, and I've been searching for that answer for 17 years now. And if it was for me personally, instead of saving the world or everything like that, for me, I just want to know what in the hell actually happened that night. For me.
Interesting.
It's a selfish answer, but
Brandon, I want to know about this. If you have time, I'm still going to ask you this last question. Do you have time to tell us that story?
I do, yes.
Okay. All right. Then let me ask you this question here, and then we'll go back to that. And then the last question is, beyond all the knowledge and experiences you've gained, what still leaves you in awe or makes you question everything?
Every time I talk with a person, I'm trying to decipher if what they're experiencing, what they've experienced, is it real? And I'm not saying they're lying, but like, I'm trying to see it from their perspective and understand it, because I feel like everyone that I talk to believes what they're telling me. I'm sure there's been a few people that may have just come on just for shits and giggles, whatever. But like, genuinely, I feel like most people are honest and they really experience what they say they experienced. And for me, it's like, why these people? That is why I'm always trying to search for answers, because why, again, we mentioned this earlier. Why me? Why are we here? What are we doing? Why this person? Why did this person? Like, why me? Why did I see this? There's answers to these questions. I've never been able to pinpoint what it is. And every time I hear a new story from someone, it makes me want to hear the next story, because I'm trying to find the piece to fit in that puzzle we talked about. So for me, it's constantly looking for pieces to understand our existence and why people experience the things we experience.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And regarding that puzzle, Brandon, it's funny. Even though you could be collecting pieces all your life,
Mm-hmm.
and you realize that the puzzle is a lot bigger than it was advertised.
Right.
You know, so like, the box said 500 pieces, but when you open up, there was 1,000 pieces. You're like, wait a minute, where does this piece go? So okay, well, let's get back to you telling your story. And I believe if I read your bio, this happened in heaven.
Yes.
Go for it. Talk to us about it.
I will give you a very brief version of it,
Sure.
but for the audience, if they look at the video, it has something to do with something like this.
Isn't that the main character that you have all over your?
Now you understand why I have what I have right above my head.
Yeah.
Basically, I saw something in the road. Like I said, I'm going to give you a very brief version, but it was an upright walking canine. I got out of a vehicle. It stood up like a human and then crouched down and walked off. There's a lot more to it than just that. But the gist of it is, that is what I saw. And I am very skeptical. I do not believe in stuff like this. But I know what I saw.
I mean, is it a werewolf? I mean, that's what your art looks like.
That's where I've been diving into it. And among the cryptid community, they call them Dogman. And
I heard that, yeah.
I don't necessarily believe in Dogman. Doesn't make any sense. Biologically, it doesn't make any sort of sense.
Mm.
It wasn't a bear. I know what a bear looks like. Everyone's like, oh, you saw a brown or a black bear. I'm not an idiot. Like, I'm not the only person that saw it. There was someone else that was driving that swerved to miss it. And then I swerved to miss it in my own, like, two separate vehicles.
Mm.
So for me, it's like, I went back. It was in the road. Thought it was a dead dog. It stood up like a human. I'm 15 feet from it with my headlights shining on it. So I got out of the vehicle like a dumbass because I thought it was a dead dog on the road. It wasn't a dead dog. I've often
Wait a
wondered
minute.
if it was...
Hold on. Wait. You shined on it with your headlights, so you got out because you thought it was a dead dog. And when you got out and you were in front of it, that's when it stood up in front of you?
Yeah, I was 15 feet from it, face to face.
Oh, hold on. I'm trying to process this for a second. Wow. Okay. Continue, please.
Like I said, for me, I don't believe in any of this stuff, so I've looked for every reason I can to write this off. Because there is no natural biological way for something like this to have happened. But laying across the road, the first thing that we saw on the road, the guide swerved to miss, there was a big shadow-shaped torso-looking thing. We didn't see arms, we didn't see a head. I swerved to miss it too. He pulled into a parking lot. I pulled in next to him. And he's asked if I saw that. He was a coworker. So the only reason I pulled in next to him, I realized it was my coworker. He'd seen this thing in the road that I'd saw. So we turned around to go back, and there's this big, large, black, wolf-looking dog across the road that wasn't there just a couple seconds ago because we swerved to miss something walking. So my thought process was whatever this was in the road has to be this dog. For some reason, I'm an idiot and correlates, why was a dog on two legs when we've seen it the first time? So I get out to walk up to this dog because it's just laying there, it looks lifeless. And that's when it stands up. Like it growls at me, it turns its head back, and its eyes are reflecting the eye shine. So I stop, and then it stands up like a person. Now for me, I didn't run. I just was standing there because I'm like, what in the hell's going on? Because is this real? Is this like a person? Is this like someone in a werewolf costume? Is this... But none of it looked like a costume. Like it was very bushy hair. Like it was very puffy hair. Its eyes were reflecting. And it growled. And it also didn't have hands. That's what's weird about it. When you hear stuff about werewolves, dogmen, anything like that, they always have like the humanoid type hands and fingers, even this little thing. Like, it has those. This thing didn't. It had like, it was like normal dog paws. Everything about it had a big bushy tail and everything. It looked like, everything about it looked like a black wolf. Until it stood up and it had shoulders like a human and its arms hang down. I say arms, but like, and then it crouched back down and walked off on two legs in a weird crab-like type walk. It's weird. Like, it's very unnatural the way it walked off on two legs. So I've tried to say it was a dog or a wolf that was hit by a car and broke its front legs. But how the hell did it learn to stand up like a person? That's just not a natural...
Was it above you?
I'm 6'3", and
6'3".
we were eye to eye, so it had to have been, like, with its ears standing up, it's taller than me. It's still a very big dog.
Yeah. I mean, like, logically, I say that with a grain of salt, how would you get something to look like that? It would need to be a hybrid of a man and a wolf.
And that doesn't make any sort of sense.
Well, it doesn't make any sort of sense. When you say that, it doesn't make any sort of sense based off of, because you don't know of any science that we have that can do that. Gotcha. Okay. But I would say is what you saw is what you saw. Mm-hmm. Remember, it goes to the foundation that we talk about. You know, we say it all the time. Your perception is your reality. Your senses. I'm sure the hair in the back of your neck, everything, like your senses said, this is what it is. This is what you projected. Now, you know, a lot of different factors could have played in: the lighting, the time of day, the environment, the location. Who knows? Maybe the planet alignment. Everything lined up exactly and perfectly as it was intended to for you to see that. Now, I think that some people like yourself that see these things and then they go one or two ways. You either fully believe that you are certain this is what I saw, period, no discussion, or you're doing what you're doing, which is you're like, the moment that you do that, that's when it starts to confuse you. It starts to kind of play with you, starts to mess with your head and everything. Believe what you saw. I'm not trying to convince you, but I'm just kind of pushing in there. Believe what you saw. And then if you bring down those barriers of that skepticism, you'll start downloading a whole lot more information. I tell folks this, the way things happen in this world is through three phases. Conscious thought creates an emotion, which then creates an action. So you had this thought, what the fuck is this? You had an emotion. Were you scared? What were you feeling?
I don't remember. And that's what's
Okay.
like, I wasn't afraid of it. And like, I'm trying to like sit here think about like, I don't remember what I felt. I was just confused. I was like, wasn't even thinking of anything other than the fact is like what you said, what the fuck? Because
Yeah.
I'm wondering, what is this thing doing? Never once did I think run.
Right.
But like at the same time, it's like I'm watching this thing stand up and I'm more or less confused as to what's going on because it doesn't make any sort of sense. Like when it growled at me before it stood up, I stopped. I'm like, oh shit, it's not dead.
Yeah.
But that was the only time I'm like was afraid or anything like that. And
Yeah.
what's funny about these things is when you dive into these topics, you hear stories of these things feeding on people's fear, which is a very low vibrational frequency type element. So
But you weren't scared.
I didn't show it any
fear.
fear, so it left.
Wait. Showing it is one thing, but did you feel fear?
I didn't feel anything other than confusion.
Okay.
Like, I didn't feel like it wanted to get me either, because if it did,
you would have known.
it could have.
Yeah.
So for me, it was just like, yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Yeah. So I mean, there's trust your instincts, right? And your instincts didn't tell you to run. That's one of our basic innate instincts. The fight or flight. So you didn't feel like doing anything. Definitely didn't feel like fighting it.
No.
So and you didn't run or anything. But remember, when there's things that there's so many things that we cannot perceive or comprehend. Like, for example, if you were to, like, talking about dimensions, if you were to peek up out of the water and you were to look at, let's say, the fourth dimension, hypothetically speaking, you wouldn't be able to like really see it because you can't perceive it. We're not built, we're not designed. So the point that I'm saying with that is that you confusion kicked in. Confusion kicked in when you see it, and be lucky that that's all that you saw. If you saw anything what I consider a higher frequency than that, because obviously that frequency was enough for you to be able to see it and perceive it. It's still confusing, but it was dense. But if you ever see anything that is higher than what you're intended to see, you go crazy. You literally short circuit, because we're not built for that. So in a sense, if you saw something weird, good thing it was at that level,
Right.
and good thing that you're safe. And I don't know if you mentioned it. You said it ran away.
It crouched down, like it hunkered down, almost like it was getting ready to take a shit, to be honest. The way it like hunkered down, but it had its front arms or legs like this, and it walked off very strangely off to the side of the road, and then I couldn't see where it went.
It walked like on this two legs.
On its
It
bottom
was
back leg.
bipedal.
Yeah, that's why I said it was a hurt dog that got hit by a car, and it couldn't use its front legs. But still, it's a very big dog. And the way it stood up, it looked very humanoid.
Is that in your area? That location?
It's 4 miles from where I live.
Have you ever been back there?
I go by that road every day.
And have you always had that conscious thought where you're like, I wouldn't mind seeing it again?
Every day, and I said, I'm going to run that motherfucker over if he steps out in front of me, because I need my answers of what it was. Now there's a brand new house that is built right there.
Mm.
So Mr. Werewolf, Dogman, whatever, got some money and built a nice big mansion-looking house in the location.
Have you knocked on the door?
No. They have a big 20-foot skeleton out front, though, for Halloween.
That's interesting. That's interesting. All right. Well, maybe that'd be to be continued. I guess that would definitely be an interesting podcast on yours or mine. So if you ever come across it, who knows, man? I have this feeling that you're gonna get your answer to that question soon enough.
Well, I'm actually 2 weeks from the day that we're recording this. So I don't know when this will air, but I'm actually giving a speech about it at a paranormal convention at the 4-H fairgrounds on the same exact road, just a mile away from where this happened. I don't want to use the word synchronicities, but the whole town is going to hear what happened, and they're all going to say I'm the town crazy person. But
Nah, I don't think they're gonna be
I'm
crazy,
trying to
but
see if anyone else has some similar
yeah,
experiences.
do it, Brandon, do it, and keep your as you're talking, as you're on that stage or that platform, keep your eyes peeled because whatever you saw is going to be there. It's just curious. It wants to hear what you have to say. Just moving forward, just be aware of that. That's interesting. Very interesting, Brandon. Brandon, I could talk to you forever, but yeah, we'll definitely. I'll be more than happy to be on your podcast. We'll definitely do a part 2. We have so much stuff to talk about on different things. We can go everywhere from quantum physics to the ancient civilizations, to parallel realities and the unknown. So, Brandon, one last time, let everybody know again who you are and how to find you.
I am Brandon Wright. I am the host of Tinfoil Tales podcast, the American version, not the Australian. I wish I didn't have to say that, but it's just what I got to do these days. And you can find me on any of the podcast listening devices, so Apple, Spotify, Spreaker, anything that you listen to podcasts on, you should be able to find Tinfoil Tales. There's also a YouTube channel, or you can go to tinfoiltales.com. And if anyone ever wants to talk to me, there is a contact button on the website so they can reach out, and I love hearing from people. Even if you don't want to come on the show, but you got a story you want to share, you can send it to me in an email.
Fantastic. Thanks, Brandon. And again, everybody, if you enjoyed this episode, I know I did. By all means, give me that like, subscribe. If you're hearing me on Spotify, give me those 5 stars. It all helps with the cause to reach out more people. And again, if you have any comments, good or bad, I take good criticism very well. Send them in. If there's anything that I or Brandon said that caught your interest or you want to dive more into, I'll be more than happy to elaborate. If you reach out to Brandon as well, I'll have his contact information on my description notes. And let's just keep having this conversation. And with that being said, guys, thank you once again for joining and tuning in to Beyond the Frequency. Keep asking those questions. Don't be afraid to go beyond the currently known and step into what's beyond the frequency.